Okay, so, well, it's my first time here as a speaker, so I'm pretty excited to share with you what I know about custom elements. Well, it's not that much, but I think it will be enough to getting started with this excited technology. So, who I am? My name is Maurizio Mangione. I'm better known as Granze on the internet. And I'm the founder of Milano JS. Milano JS is the Milano user group, JavaScript user group, of course. And I run one-day workshop called JS Course that aims to involve more girls in JavaScript programming. I'm a Google developer expert for web technologies and I specialize on Polymer. And in my spare time, I work as manager in Accenture. So many of you may remember me for all the Polymer talks I gave in the past year. And I was really in the Polymer stuff and for a long time, and I organize hackathon, a lot of training and stuff like that. But after years, I find out that people don't really got the difference between web components and Polymer. So lots of people really didn't understand where web components ends and where Polymer starts. So Polymer, of course, is not the same of web components. Polymer is just a library by Google that is on top of this standard. So talking about component, I think that this is really a tough moment to be a front-end developer, but for the first time in the front-end history, maybe we all agree on one thing, that the component-based architecture is the way to go. We have framework, we have libraries based on this concept, and we have a standard as well. So there's a lot of way we can build components. We have Angular 2, they have the concept of components, but in Angular 1.5 as well, we have React, we have component in Ember, Vue is also component based, but you can build some kind of component also with jQuery if you want. But my question is, if you have a standard like web component, why we are still using framework and libraries? Don't get me wrong, I really like Angular, I really love React, I really like Ember, I really like Vue, and skip the last one. So, what web components actually are? So, we have 4 specifications in this standard. The last 2 are not really so excited, so I will go really fast on that 2. And of course, I will focus on the first one, that are custom elements. So HTML templates are a tag, a template tag that is implemented in every modern browser. And this allows us to create snippets of code, templates. And the particularity of this specification is that if I have a script inside a template tag, if I have a image tag, for example, the image will be not downloaded and the script is not executed if until I clone or activate this template. HTML imports are actually a cool specification, but the problem with HTML imports that allow us to import HTML file in HTML is pretty cool, but the problem is the tool chain we use today is based on ECMAScript imports, is based on CommonJS modules, so this doesn't work the same way. It's different. So if you want to use HTML imports, you have to change all your build tools, your build chain, because you are dealing with HTML5 with HTML file with JavaScript and CSS inside. So there are tools for this kind of job. There is a tool built from the Google team called Vulcanize, then actually extract the CSS and the JavaScript from the HTML5 and combine and try to avoid multiple inclusion of the same dependencies like ECMAScript imports does. The Shadow DOM is probably one of the more exciting API in this specification, because it allows us to encapsulate the DOM of the component, so the HTML is completely encapsulated and the CSS, the styles, are encapsulated as well. So if you are a React developer, you are familiar with CSS in JS and styled component, all this stuff that are cool stuff, but the fact is they're trying to solve a problem, and they solve this problem in a, let's say, hacky way. And with Shadow DOM, we will not have this problem anymore because of the encapsulation. Every time I tried to explain the Shadow DOM more in deep, I thought it was really hard to understand, but at the end of the day, if you look in custom elements and you look in what they can do, maybe custom elements are more difficult to explain, or they do a lot of things you maybe don't know. So just a bit of history, because lately the spec of custom element and Shadow DOM changed. A couple of years ago, Google started pushing really hard on the specification of custom element and Shadow DOM and web component in general. And they implement the first specification called V0, and the other browser vendor don't seems to be so excited about this spec, and Google tried to push more and talk to the other browser vendor and try to let understand how important is this spec. So at the end of the day, all the browser vendor agree on this, but they wanted to change the specification of these two specs, custom element and Shadow DOM. So because I'm not here to sell you web components, I will start from the beginning with the bad news. So custom elements are not implemented in all browsers today. So we have a stable version of the new spec in Firefox, no, sorry, in Chrome, in Opera, that use the same engine. In Safari, um, um, Firefox is developing the specification right now, so we can expect this by the end of the year. And Microsoft with Edge is considering to implement this spec. For custom element and shadow DOM, we can use a polyfill to use this specification today. And for custom elements is pretty easy because it's not so hard to polyfill this specification, but is not really the same for the shadow DOM, since you can't really, you know, really encapsulate the DOM and the CSS. So it's like a shim, like a hacky way to do this thing, but at least you can use the same API today, and this is good. So I will not go deeper on Shadow DOM, and let's start with the main topic of this talk, the custom elements. So this is a custom element. So it's just a tag with a name I can choose, and the only limitation on the implementation side is I have to put a dash in the name, so no big deal. How it looks, the custom element on the code side. So with the v1 specification, I need to implement my custom element by using a ES6 class. Who here is a ES6 class hater? No one? Ah, a couple of you, okay. I have to say I'm not a big fan of ES6 classes as well, but in this case I think that it's pretty easy to understand what is happening here, so it's pretty declarative. So I'm creating a class called myTag that extends HTML elements. HTML element is just the basic element of the DOM, is like a span, let's say. The first thing I need to do is to call my constructor and call super, because I need to, you know, inherit all the things inside the HTML element. And in, I think, every language in the constructor, the constructor is used to set up your class, so as to initialize some properties and stuff like that. In the connected callback, when the component is actually ready, I can put some content in the component. And after that, I need to define my custom element and to reference the class I just created with a name, the name of the tag. So let's do a quick demo. So since this is the first time I do a live coding demo at a conference, I create a component called YOLO element. So this is the basic component, is like the code you just said before, and this is the HTML page, nothing fancy. So I import my element, and I just need to use the tag to instantiate the custom element. And this is what I get. Of course, HTML tag have attributes. So I can, for example, set an attribute with a value of ciao, and I can say use the value of this attribute, and if the attribute is not set, you can use this backup, no? The default text. But why is not working? The first time I was scratching my head for hours because I said, well, why is not working? Well, the answer is very simple. Constructors are made to uh, initialize properties and stuff like that, but this is not a simple class. This is a custom element, so there is a part really connected to the DOM, and the constructor is called before the element is actually in the DOM, so this can't work. For this reason, I need to move my initialization in the connected callback. And voila. So we just saw the connected callback. Connected callback is a last cycle event, but we have several events built in the custom element. So this probably remind you React is more or less the same approach. So we have the connected callback that is called when the element is actually inserted in the DOM. We have a disconnected callback when you probably want to remove the listeners and stuff like that. We have attribute change callback that is really cool because it's like a listener on our attributes. So we can have a notification when the attribute change for free, just built in the specification. And we have an adopted callback that I really don't know what do. So are attributes any good? We can use just the attributes? I don't think so. Because attributes, as you may know, supports strings and boolean. But what if you need to pass more complex data? So like object, for example, like we do in React, we use properties. So we have getter and setter built in the ES6 class, so we can leverage this standard to do some cool things. So super quick, copy and paste. It works always, I think so. Not this time, maybe. Okay, it's working. Okay. So if I go and change the value of the attribute, probably this work. And this for a reason. So let's see the code. First of all, I need to tell the class which attributes I want to listen to. So I return an array with attributes I want to observe. I have my connected callback, it's the same as before. Then I have my attribute change callback, and this is evaluate every time an attribute change, and a setter will called if something actually change. So this is my setter, and in this case the thing I do is also to reflect, because I can change the value of my attributes also via properties. So I can just select the tag and dot MSG and set a new value. But in some cases, I want to set the attribute as well, because I want to sync the two properties and attributes. This is not needed always, but maybe if you use the attributes also to, I don't know, hide and show the element, or to do particular stuff with CSS, is pretty handy. So, what is missing here? Well, of course, the custom element have to interact with your application. So the part is missing is the custom event. But fortunately, we have a standard that is custom event we can use in our custom, in this case is a custom checkbox. We can fire an event every time the checkbox is clicked. So this is more or less the schema. So I can access to the component with attributes and properties, and I can fire from the components events. So the data flow more or less can be this. So I will use attributes just for initialize the component, but if I want to pass a new state or data, I will use properties, and sometimes I will reflect the properties to the attributes because I need it, and I can use custom events to notify other component, or I don't know, you can simply use a mediator pattern, for example, so you can fire event to the parent component, and the parent component will propagate the props to all the children. So you may notice that I use inner HTML in my component. So inner HTML sucks, yes, okay, and but you are free to do what you want, to use what you prefer. I think that for really small component, it's just okay to use inner HTML or document fragment. But if you have more complex component, maybe you should, or you want to use something like virtual DOM and all this fancy stuff. In this example, this is a render function that I will put in a custom element, and I'm using diff HTML that is like virtual DOM, but you can actually write HTML and not JSX or JavaScript to do this. And what happened in this case, inner HTML you see there is not the standard inner HTML, but is inner HTML you get from the diff HTML library. So this is what you get. So the component is not re-render entirely. All the small part that is changing, so you get the same result as you can get with React on or stuff like that. So another cool stuff about custom element is the progressive enhancement stuff you get, because you can not only extend the HTML element, the basic one, but you can also extend more complex HTML element like a button. And okay, it's not so a complex element, but if you extend this component to create a super button, you get for free all the accessibility stuff built in the button and stuff like that. The only thing you have to change in the definition is you have to say that you are extended a button tag. So What about custom element in production? I don't think there are really too many people using nowadays custom element production, but there are a couple of things to say or to think of. First of all, abstraction. Why abstraction? Because this is a low-level API, and getter and setter are really, really verbose. And for each property, you check every time if this property is the property path is actually the same on or a new one. So you have to write a lot of code. So you may want to abstract some kind of thing, and it's up to you what you want to abstract. I'm playing in these days trying to, instead of extending the HTML element, the base one, I create my HTML element with some abstraction in it, and then I'm going to extend my component instead the HTML element. This is a lifesaver because since ECMAScript 6 is not implemented in all browser, we have to transpile our component, and the problem is that some primitives of the classes are not implemented in ES5, so the transpilation actually will broke your element. So if you use the polyfill, all will go really well, but if the element is natively implemented in the browser and you transpile your ES6 in ES5, you will get an error. So this plugin will save your life because under the hood this will fix all the stuff for you. So you may heard that web components work everywhere. Is that true? Well, it's not really true. I mean, the idea is that web components should work everywhere, but there are some limitations. For example, if you want to use web components in React, you may have some problem with events because React use synthetic events and the web components use standard events. So you can work around this and get the stuff done, but it's not working out of the box. So based on this idea, I'm working on a pattern library in Accenture, and this may seem surprising that we are working on custom element, and we are trying to build a catalog of framework agnostic components, since we have a lot of a project in Angular, in React, in Vue.js. So I think it's a good idea to build this kind of component. I think almost everyone here have built some component, some reusable component for its project. So you may work in React and you build a tab component or stuff like that, because you have to reuse the same component in the project, but maybe also in other projects that use React, but every time is the same problem, because this tab component, for example, you can use it in Angular. So if you have a project in Angular, you are start building a reusable component and in this framework as well, and you end up building reusable component for every framework. So I'm actually building another components, another catalog of components. So some of you may ask, are you reinventing the wheel? And the answer is yes. I'm reinventing the wheel actually, but I'm trying to implement a new kind of wheel with tires that can adapt on every terrain. Thank you very much. That's it.